Hello and welcome to the Sands of Time review channel. It is your host Sammy Thunder here today. Today I'm here to provide an owner's review of a recent pickup actually. This is the SJE075. This is a Seiko Presage watch, and the biggest and most important thing about this watch is that it features a very stark enamel dial. I will also be providing a comparison or more of an insight of this particular watch versus the other enamel dial watches that are currently in production by Seiko, and also provide an overview of this watch. First and foremost, it was a recent pickup, and it's a spectacular watch. This is a high-end Seiko Presage, and this is a discontinued model. It's in absolutely mint condition, and it's currently on an aftermarket strap, but it actually does come with one alligator and one shell Cordovan strap, which is done to an extremely high quality. Almost, it is a Grand Seiko level of strap. So this is a discontinued model. So this is an SJE variant. So just by the title itself, the naming of this watch, it features this 6L35 movement, and it's an extremely thin movement that's meant to rival the ETA 2824. Right, it's an extremely thin movement, and it allows the watch to be housed in such a slim and slender case. The movement, sorry, so the dial. So the main thing about this watch is that it is a high-end Seiko Presage. It features a white enamel dial, and it features these Breguet-like numerals. These are the numerals that you would find on the Seiko Laurel, or the Laurel, which is paying respects to the very first wristwatch made by Seiko. Compared to other Presage models, this dial or this watch itself features a nice leaf-shaped handset, and it features center capping, and compared to the other Presage models, which don't. So the execution of this watch is done to a much higher standard. First and foremost, look, the case diameters of this watch is 39.5 mils, and the actual case or lug to lug of the watch is around, I think, 46.9 mils, and the thickness is 10.9. Now, this is a discontinued model, and I would like to kind of go through what's so special about this watch compared to the other Presages. I mean, the first thing you need to know is that this watch, RRP wise, is very expensive and very costly. It is 4,700 Australian dollars. It is quite on the pricey side. So what warrants this? I think the first thing that you need to note is that the execution of the watch in terms of the movement used, the 6L35 is a much higher caliber compared to the 6R35 or other variants of the 6R movement, which have a higher accuracy range, whereas this movement here is much more precise. And I will get to this later in the con section. But the other thing about this watch is that it features a boxed dome sapphire crystal. And it's a very well done sapphire crystal, as in you can actually see through that domed or boxy part. And that's how you know there's a lot of effort put onto this watch. It's a very, very well executed watch. And I don't think Seiko will do something like this again in the Presage range. So that's the watch up in the macro. It's a stellar watch. It has anti-reflective coating, and the white dial, I mean, it's just so hard to see the reflections. It's a very milky white dial. It's a very, very milky white dial. So the watch itself, the case is very well finished, and it's very reminiscent to the actual existing Presages. But the level of finishing and the details are exquisite. You can just look at those lugs, and if you can look at them, you have top part brushing, and then as you go towards the lug strap part, you see that delineation in high polish. The watch itself features a mirror-like finishing on the side case flank, and I'll try to get that. As you can see, features that mirror-like finishing. It's probably not Zaratsu, but I really can't tell what Seiko does there, but it's a very well finished watch. The next thing I'd like to go through about this watch is that a lot of people have made some remarks about this watch in terms of the date layout and the date placement. In reality, you don't need a date, but I think at the time, the 6L35 movement, Seiko had not tried to endeavor to change it until much recently, I think, where we have our King Seikos that don't feature a date. So they probably didn't modify the movement back then, and they featured, look, we really need to include the date. And a lot of people do complain about the 3 o'clock date window. For me personally, it's not too much of a bother. So how did I come across this watch, and why did I purchase it? There's no way I purchased this watch for 4,700 Australian dollars, right? Yes, I didn't purchase it at that price, and I will first go through some of the cons. The first being the price. This watch was released around 2019. And back then, Seiko Presage name was just about to, Seiko was just starting to get into this taxonomy with their sub-branding. So, yes, we have a Seiko Presage, but a $4,700 Seiko Presage didn't really make sense from the brand end, because who wants to pay $4,700 when you can buy Grand Seiko? And that's precisely a good reason and why it's discontinued. I personally think that this watch is a failed watch from the brand. But right now, it's discontinued. You can find many examples from Japan, and you can purchase them pretty much half price, and that's what I got it for. Half price, maybe if not more. So the major con here is the pricing. It's very hard to recommend such a watch. But the good thing is you do get these 2 straps, right? And they're very well done. So you get these 2 very high quality straps, and they have really good hardware. And this is very subtle alligator, very much like a Grand Seiko strap. And then you have a nice shell Cordovan. So that's a good thing. At least you're getting something for your money. So that's one thing. The other thing about this watch, and you've probably noticed or picked up, is that if you look at the handset clearly, you're going to notice that the hands on this watch, right, they are painted blue. They are not actually a thermally blued handset. I know in this lighting it looks very, it's very deceiving. It can look like it's thermally blue, but upon closer inspection you can tell under the hood and under the macro there's a glassy and glossy sheen. And I've owned many watches that feature thermally blued hands, from Stover Marine to Grand Seiko, and you can look at my videos there. I do macro footage on that as well, and this particular watch does not feature thermally blued hands, and no Seiko Presage currently does. This is very confusing, but let me explain to you. You have Seiko, you have Grand Seiko, and you have Cradle. The brand itself needs to limit their creativity and watch craftsmanship based on the price and based on the name. Grand Seiko is exclusive for having thermally blued hands, but Seiko is not. There is only one Seiko which had thermally blued hands, and it's the SJE073. It's like a baby snowflake, and Seiko advertised that. If you look at any advertising material or promotional material for any of the Seiko Presage watches, they never advertise that they have thermally blued hands. But a lot of YouTubers are deceived, and they tell the audience that there are thermally blued hands on this watch. And I would like to tell you that these are not thermally blued. These are indeed painted, and Seiko actually confirmed to me this in an email and told me, look, it's pretty much just painted blue. I'm not trying to say that these hands are bad. They're very good handset, and there's a decent quality to it. My only gripe is that if this watch here and other Seiko Presages that have been created by Seiko to commemorate and to pay respects to the laurel, the very first wristwatch, why not use thermally blued hands? Especially this particular watch, it's 4,700 Australian dollars. The SJE073 was much cheaper than this, and it featured a thermally blued hands. So it's very confusing what Seiko has done here. Now, this is a discontinued model, but it's very hard to recommend someone this kind of watch. Look, it has an enamel dial, and that's the star of the show. It features an enamel dial. There is a sense of hand craftsmanship to it. There is a struggle to manufacture the dial, but I think they should have gone the extra mile to provide to you a thermally blued hands on this watch, and it would have paired beautifully, and it would have been a keeper. Look, it is a well executed watch. It just looks so damn good, right? You've got the red 12, the Breguet style numerals. It literally evokes a feeling of the Laurel. It's done exquisitely, finished exquisitely, but just that one lacking aspect can ruin a watch for some people. The other con I'd like to mention is that, and this goes back to the Seiko, Grand Seiko and Cradle, that in the watchmaking they need to limit their craftsmanship. Seiko release watches that cost $50 all the way to $8,000 within the Seiko branding. There's very much quite a lot of high-end Seiko Prospex models, and they feature 8L35 movements, which is a Grand Seiko derived movement. Now that movement has a tolerance of plus 15 to minus 10 seconds a day. It's the same as the 6L here. Now, what is my watch running at? Plus 15 seconds a day. Look, personally to me it's not a deal breaker, but it is within the Seiko spec of tolerance. A lot of people say, oh, you know, in these higher end Seikos, the movements run with much better accuracy. No, that's true. That's probably true. You know, it probably does outperform COSC in some cases. But what happens in the odd case it doesn't? You know, it's still going to be within spec. It's 15 seconds a day. It's not like I can go to Seiko and get it regulated now under warranty. No. It would cost money if I really wanted to regulate the movement. Look, personally to me, it doesn't matter. Okay? Because I wear this watch probably once or twice a week. The plus 15 seconds a day is livable. It's not a chronometer grade movement. But at 4,700 Australian dollars, I think people would care. So that is something to notice, okay? And this is the difference between Seiko and Grand Seiko, right? This is the difference between Seiko and Cradle, because look, the Mitsuru Yokosawa, the person who manufactures this dial, also works with Cradle enamel or porcelain dials. I'm not 100% sure, but there is some involvement there. And you will see different levels of craftsmanship, and you need to note that. So, do I recommend this watch? Look, even at half price, you know, even if it was even at 1,800 Australian dollars, I think it's a good watch. I think it does extremely well compared to the other existing Presages because they're too overly thick. This is extremely slender and thin. The box crystal evokes a very high-end, feel to the watch. It feels like a high-end watch. The movement is well decorated for the price. It's well finished for the price. It's very nice. It's a strap monster as well. You know, you can pair it with any other kind of strap. So I can recommend this at a good price. But if the thermally blued handsets is something that actually bothers you, then probably not. I would look at the blue enamel variation of this watch. And you can get these for around $2,000 from a Japanese dealer. And I think that's worth the price, especially with the two straps that you get and the hardware. So the next question is, should you be buying the existing Presage models? I mean, you get the same level of dial finishing. You probably won't get this level of box crystal or even the capped handset or the movement, but you will get a very, very well, handcrafted dial, with the enamel, porcelain, Arita porcelain, Shippo enamel, black lacquer dial, urushi. There's a lot in the craftsmanship range. And I think they are starting to do thinner watches at around 12.1 to 12.5 mils thickness. But this watch here is 10.9 mils thick and includes that box crystal. It feels extremely thin, and when I compare it to something like the Longines Silver Arrow, right, these two are very thin and very, I would consider, competitors. You know, they feel very high-end because they're thin, they're executed well in design. Now, if you look at these two watches, something to note is that this watch here features super hard coating. It's Seiko's proprietary coating, and it helps with scratches. You know, it pretty much increases the scratch resistance of the watch compared to this Longines. You can also tell the sheen of color, the sheen of the metal, the color that this watch brings over this. The Longines is a much brighter steel, whereas the Seiko is a much more duller, oily kind of steel. It's hard to show on camera, but you will notice it. So that's something to be wary of. So it really comes down to what you're looking. So there are many market competitors to this kind of watch. At 4,700 Australian dollars, I'm looking at Longines, right? Longines is able to feature watches from the Master Collection or Heritage line with engraving, you know, very similar kind of watches. And honestly, it's very hard to recommend this kind of watch because the Longines is offering, you know, chronometer level movement, excellent finishing on the case and movement, the dial, the execution is done superbly. But look, it really depends on your budget. If you're willing to extend to around $2,000, this is a good option over the existing Presage models if you're buying brand new. I would buy this kind of watch pre-owned, either the blue enamel or the Shippo enamel, right? Or even this model if you prefer something to be a watch more like the original Laurel. So that's where I would provide a recommendation there, is that you can look at purchasing this model, the SJE version, over the SPB versions, and you do get there is a much bigger difference between those two. But if you want to purchase, you know, your budget is tight, obviously look at the SPB variations, especially the older versions, especially the SARD series, SARD series, which is meant to feature this Riki Watanabe clock style face on the dial. They're very good value and they're very beautiful watches. So yeah, this would be a review of my SJE075. I honestly don't know what I'll do with it. The most important thing is that despite any other drawbacks, I really enjoy the watch because it just looks too damn good. It's as simple as that. So thanks for watching. It's the Sands of Time. Peace.